How is the perception of Kennedy's Camelot contradicted by his actions? Does Kennedy's presidency deserve the title of Camelot? While Kennedy was perceived as the king of the White House, in reality he may not have been the American hero he is believed to be. During his tenure in office, JFK earned himself a positive reputation and public image. He did so mainly by using the media of the 1960s. John F. Kennedy was the first president to effectively use the new medium of television to speak directly to the American people. No other president had conducted live televised press conferences without delay or editing. The Nixon-Kennedy debate was broadcast on televisions, now popular in American homes, and helped him win the election of 1960. Many people admired JFK for his youth, good looks, and seemingly perfect life. This perception of having a charmed life is where First Lady Jackie Kennedy got the idea of Camelot. JFK was revered as a war hero. He served in the Navy during World War II. He was also called a family man. He had 2 children, Caroline Kennedy and John Kennedy Jr. One of the most important aspects of JFK's public image was his wife, Jackie. Jackie was an iconic fashion figure of her time, and she quickly became a trendsetter. Her style influenced designers, magazines, newspapers, and the public in a positive way. Her popular reputation contributed to the progressive and modern perception of the Kennedy presidency. The Kennedys believed that the Society of America had come of age. Together they celebrated American culture and encouraged Americans to take pride in their artistic as well as their political heritage. They transformed the White House into a showcase for cultural, artistic, and intellectual achievements. Authors, scientists, artists, musicians, and actors mingled with politicians, diplomats, and statesmen. The Kennedys helped open up the White House to the American people. Through his great relationship with the media, his good looks, and seemingly perfect personality, and with the support and image of his iconic family, John F. Kennedy created the ultimate public perception. JFK maintains to this day a positive image. However, there are many negative aspects of John F. Kennedy that are often overlooked. Not everyone was necessarily a fan of Kennedy. He generated a lot of animosity for being Catholic. People worried about the continued separation of church and state with a Catholic president in office and the influence of the Vatican. Although some appreciated the fact that Kennedy was young, his youth was also a turnoff to many people. He was thought of as diplomatically inexperienced and soft on communism.
I don't think that youth is any presumption of vitality, or old age any presumption of wisdom. It really, once again, it seems to me, depends on the competence of the individual.
Despite President Kennedy's popularity amongst the masses, the actions he took in office were occasionally flawed. In late April 1961, over 1,400 members of the Cuban Expeditionary Forces landed at the Bay of Pigs in Cuba. Their mission was to overthrow the communist regime of Cuban President Fidel Castro. The mission was a striking failure. Almost immediately, it became known that the CIA trained the freedom-fighting Cubans who planned to overthrow Castro's regime. President Kennedy had approved the mission. Soon after the failure, he spoke at a meeting of the American Association of Newspaper Editors and assumed all blame for the failed invasion. His staff then began leaking information to reporters, blaming the failure on anyone except the administration. President Kennedy was quoted as saying, "How could I have been so stupid to trust his advisors?" JFK is often remembered for his great success regarding civil rights, but in reality he did little to further the movement. Because Kennedy was a Democrat, he relied on votes from the South and shied away from the controversial civil rights issue. He was more focused on issues with foreign powers rather than problems occurring at home, delegating domestic affairs to his brother Bobby. While demonstrations and protests took place across the nation, the government ignored the demands of the protesters, until disaster struck in Alabama. In early May, hundreds of protesters, many of them teenagers, marched through Birmingham. The marchers went head-to-head with police officer Bull Connor, who violently fought the protesters, attacking them with police dogs and spraying them with fire hoses.
Only made in this century to the proposition that race has no place in American life.
Due to pressures from Congress, President Kennedy publicly announced that segregation was immoral and that the violence needed to come to an end. The Civil Rights Address gave JFK the reputation of a civil rights president, although ultimately he only acted when it was absolutely necessary.
Oh, baby. Womanizer, womanizer, you're a womanizer, oh, womanizer, oh, you're a womanizer, baby. You are.
John F. Kennedy's affairs with different women have become the stuff of legend. One historian describes JFK as a compulsive womanizer, whose urge for sexual conquest was fueled by a complex array of personal traumas. Some of the alleged women to have had affairs with JFK are Marilyn Monroe, the Dynamite movie goddess, Mimi Alford, a college intern at the White House, and Judith Exner, a Los Angeles socialite who had previously dated Frank Sinatra. These scandals and flawed actions are overshadowed by JFK's massive positive image, as well as something much more tragic, his assassination. November 22, 1963, President Kennedy was shot and killed while parading through Dallas, Texas. He was dead by the end of the day. The first president to die in office since FDR, and the first assassinated president since William McKinley in 1901, Kennedy's death shocked the nation. The 1950s, a decade of innocence and prosperity in the United States, came to an abrupt end with the assassination. Americans' hope for continued success was manifested in JFK, and the faith for a better future ceased to be when he was killed. The people of America believed in the good Kennedy promised, but the unachieved glory and the unkept promises could never be fulfilled. Americans were left wondering, what if? And this unanswerable question glorified Kennedy's legacy. Maybe Kennedy could have stepped up in civil rights and Cold War issues. Perhaps the nation would have seen progress. But left with uncertainty, history remembers the 35th president the way he could have been, not what he was. Today, Kennedy is viewed as an iconic figure both through his presidency and the culture of his time. In recent polls, JFK is remembered to be an amazing president, with a 70% approval rating, the highest of presidents since Franklin Roosevelt. He is remembered for his charm, charisma, and quintessential lifestyle, and is highly regarded in the public eye. Historians, however, do not always share the opinion of the average citizen. They commend the president for some of his gains, but consider his many flaws as well. No one knows how he could have further affected the United States if his presidency had continued, but the legacy of his life in Camelot will always remain.
Come gather round, people, wherever you roam, and admit that the waters around you have grown, and accept it that soon you'll be drenched to the bone. If your time to you is worth saving, then you better start swimming or you'll sink like a stone. For the times they are a-changin'.